So our marketing campaign as a UK government is very often, the tagline is see things differently and do things differently. The only country who went to EWF with the clear mind and vision
of what they wanted to achieve.
But also of their ask. They knew exactly what to ask in what forum, and that got the whole room, which was a mix of private sector investors, to pick up those leads and to start talking. A UK institution setting up in Mauritius, the cost is a third of what you pay in the UK.
Hi everyone, I've got a small favor to ask. I know that many of you have been watching these conversations over the past couple of years with people who inspire. It would mean a lot to us and it would help us continue to have these conversations if you would just subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Deeptee, welcome.
Thank you.
I know you're slightly jet lagged, as am I. I've just returned back from Europe as well, so we'll try to make this conversation as lively and engaging as possible. I understand we went to the same school.
Yes,
at
we
one
did.
point
At one point in time, yes.
And so that was a long time ago. My first question to you was going to be, back then, did you know that your career will take the direction that it has taken today? Were you always interested in international relationship, diplomacy, trade between countries and issues like that?
So straightforward answer would be yes.
Okay.
Yes, but not within the trade kind of section. So I come from a very humble background. Both my parents are primary school teachers. My grandparents were all planters and farmers. So I'm proud to say I am one of the first girls in my family to have traveled abroad to go to university.
Wow.
All my other cousins have studied in Mauritius, have kind of made their path and their career from themselves. I think from a very young age, I was fascinated by travel. Mm-hmm. That is where it started. But I just didn't know where. I was fascinated by, getting in over countries. And then to your question of back in school, I think you will recall we used to have MUN, Model United Nations.
Yes, did you participate?
So I was a delegate of Belgium, and I think that was the trigger. Being part, the preparation, being in that room, though it was a mock exercise, but debating on issues around international relations, politics, I think that was my trigger. And as a student, you're like, oh, I can make a change. And if that's how I can make a change, then that's how it started. So I went on to do my studies so I've got a degree in international relations from Nottingham University. My first degree was actually in English language, an honours in English language at University of Mauritius.
I would have loved to do that. That was my dream, and somehow I got sidetracked, but you must have enjoyed that.
I absolutely enjoyed it because, like I said, I come from a humble family, so my parents couldn't afford to send me to, though I had good results, but couldn't kind of fully fund for me to go to the UK, and that was where I wanted to be. So I made sure I had a great undergrad so I could get a scholarship. One of the things my dad always says, and he's very proud, is everything that I've done has been on my own thing and in terms of scholarship. So I went on to do international relations at University of Nottingham, and then I decided to come back. But I think it was an early move to decide to come back to Mauritius. I come back in 2008, but then at that point, it's quite early when you talk about international relations, and the modules I had decided to do weren't quite kind of popular. I specialize in terrorism, counter-terrorism.
Oh, wow.
Those kind of things that wasn't really relevant for Mauritius.
Why did you choose
I think at that point it was an experience. I was in my second semester and I came to Mauritius for holidays, and it was that period where there was kind of terrorism attacked, and then there was the case of a Mauritian student kind of being roped in. I remember coming back, walking in, I arrive at 7 a.m. I am profiled as a Mauritian student.
Really?
I am
in the UK?
In the UK, while I'm coming back on my studies, stripped naked, for search, and asked me a lot of questions. Why am I studying international relations? Why you're from Mauritius? Why all of that? And I get out at 3 in the afternoon.
That must have been quite... I would have been really... Yes, I was looking for the word, but interestingly, that didn't put you off.
No, it didn't put me off, but it did kind of make me realize, why do people act the way they do? And in my 3rd semester, when I had to choose the rest of my module, I went in for terrorism and counterterrorism just because it triggered me, that whole thing. I come back to Mauritius. It wasn't easy to find a job, but then I take a step back and I decided to go into teaching. My first job was actually teaching.
Wow. So following the footsteps of your parents,
of my parents,
in a way.
Actually,
yeah.
I do that for a couple of years, and then I still find it like, still passionate about international relations. And while I'm teaching English in that school that I do, I am now a teacher supporting my student to do MUN again.
Oh,
and being there, it rekindles, and I'm like, no, I have to pursue it. I have to find a way to get out there. I get a second scholarship. I go to do a master's in diplomacy and trade. That's where I decided to specialize in trade from the Australian government, the Australia Awards for Africa. And I also back at the same time a leadership scholarship for that. That scholarship allows you to do your master's, get a bit of work experience, but also it gives you a mentor. My mentor is the then governor, Quentin Bryce of Australia. She helps me and I tell her all about my dream. And she was like, go for it. You should absolutely go for it. And I think trade is what will open all the doors. And she was like it or not, trade is politics. Trade is what will get people out
what
there.
we're seeing play out now with the trade wars.
So that's how the whole journey started. I come back again in 2014, decided to come back home. And this time around, there's a couple of jobs that are advertised. And I applied for the job in the British High Commission in 2016.
Wow.
I start as an industry officer. I've since then moved across the department, gone up the ladder. Today I'm the country director for the Department of Business and Trade, and I head a team of 4.
So just to clarify, because I think, that puzzled me at the beginning, and I think chatting to you before, I understand that's a common question as well. So your employer, as it were, is the British government, is the UK government. It is the Department for Business and Trade is not like a Chamber of Commerce.
No. So in the UK, we don't have ministries. We've got departments. So the Department for Business and Trade is, if you would like, it's a bit like the Mauritian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade. So we are the commercial arm of the UK government. So we're present around the world. In bigger markets, we have our office of our own. So it will be what we commonly call DBT offices. Right. So South Africa, for instance, in Africa is one of the biggest. They have an independent DBT office. In markets where we are small, we either base in British High Commissions or British embassies. And it's part of what we call our HMG offer, His Majesty's government offer. So it's the UK government. So we work there. The difference between us and the chamber in many markets, again, where it's a big market, you have presence of Chamber of Commerce. In smaller markets where we are present, we haven't felt the need for chamber. Right. It's not that it will not exist, but if any British business or anyone is interested, do come and speak to us. Would happily support, but there's a guideline, there's a procedure. Unlike what many people think, you can't just set up a business chamber. Right,
that's what I thought, that just a group of people get together and just set up a... Right,
you will have to get in touch and affiliate yourself with the British chambers in the UK. Okay. There's certain norm and guidelines to be able to do it, and we'll be very happy to support if there is need. But what we do have in Mauritius is what we call an informal British business group, where we work commonly with and closely with British businesses like, from the banking sector, HSBC, Standard Chartered, education will be Middlesex. We rally all the British businesses and brands together. Right. And every time we've asked them, do you feel the need? Do you want to have a British chamber? And they were like, no, we're happy.
We're happy dealing with you guys. Yeah. So what is it exactly that you do on a daily basis?
So my work and the work of my team on a daily basis, as I said, we are the British government commercial arm. So if we can put that, there is 3 baskets we can put the type of work that we do. So we do trade, investment, trade policy, and market access work. What does that mean? Trade would be direct commercial deals. So let's say you, Rowan, wants to import products and services from the UK. You want to import a particular brand, you don't know how to reach them. You come to us, we'll link you up. We'll help you support and make the deal happen.
So you're talking B2B?
B2B.
Yeah.
B2B. And then when we talk about investment, it's also, so we do what we call ODI, outwards investment, so from the UK into Mauritius, but also FDI, from Mauritius into the UK. So companies who want to open offices or branches in the UK, we help them. One example I can give you from the education sector is Rushmore Business School. 2 years ago decided to open an office in the UK. We help them open it in the UK.
Wow.
So we'll help you, we'll guide you. The reason of working with us is what it does, it allows both clients in terms of UK business wanting to do business in Mauritius when they go for us, is the partner will work or will find for you is a legit, will help you do due diligence, and that you have that reinforcement that the UK government is supporting you as a UK business to do the business. From a Mauritian perspective, when you come to us, we give you the guarantee that the client list that we propose to you are companies that we know about, that's been verified by our system. We won't do what we call due diligence for you. That is one thing that I want to put out. Very often companies come to us and say, why did you pick A over B?
Right.
We don't do the choice for you. You come to me and tell me, for example, I'd like to meet with people, or let's take an example, for example. You come to me and say, I'm a UK university. I am interested into finding a partner in Mauritius. We will tell you what kind of partner, what kind of partnership are you? Are you after a franchise? Do you want to open a branch campus?
Yeah.
We'll get into the details and the nitty-gritty of what that is.
Yeah.
And second, what we'll do is we'll build a list of potential and tell you, for example, these are a list of people who've approached us and who we know are credible people or great investors, or these are the people. We'll do the introduction call to all 10 of them. Let's say we've given you 10. We'll then allow you to think about and have a conversation with you and tell you then, out of the 10, with whom do you want to carry forward that conversation?
Right.
We'll streamline. So we start with you from that initial identification to the actual closure of the deal and implementation of the deal.
Oh, wow. So you accompany that
we
business
accompany
all the way through.
both the UK companies and the Mauritian company in their export and import journey.
But what you don't do is, for example, if I'm a big Mauritian producer and I say to you, I want to place my product in the best supermarkets in the UK, you won't say, no, I want you to choose Waitrose, for example. You don't make the choice for them.
No, I wouldn't make the choice for you. But what I would do for you, I will say, can you give me a list of the product you want to export to the UK?
Right.
I will then go back to my team in London, some of what we call our international trade advisor, our ITAs, and say, do you have a list of potential buyers for these products?
Right.
Well, they will give me, it could be John Lewis, it could be Waitrose, it could be Sainsbury's, Tesco, whatever list they will give us, we'll pass that on to you.
Right.
But what we will help you do ultimately is to guide you for you to make the best decision in your interest.
Based on your requirements. On our requirements, yeah.
And ultimately, we do have that, and I should put it, we do have clients who've gone against or have ultimately recommendation and gone ahead. We will let you go and do that because that's your call. We're not here to tell you what to do and what not to do, and we'll support you. But we would flag, if tomorrow there's an issue, we did flag it, and we kind of have an audit trail as the UK government, because at the end of the day, we are civil servants, and it's the UK taxpayers' money at the end of the day, and we need to have accountability and value for money there.
Yeah, of course.
So that's the kind of journey that we will do.
So that was just the first bucket, right?
That was 2 of the buckets, trade and investment, because from the investment perspective, the same rule will apply.
Yeah.
Now, 2 of the new things that we started doing is, like I said, trade policy, more and more of that. So all the trade agreements. So for example, Mauritius and the UK do not have a bilateral trade agreement. Mauritius and UK trades under what we call the Eastern Southern Africa, IPA-ISA agreement, where you've got a couple of countries together. So we will support the Mauritian government, but also all the people who are influenced by that around that. So, for example, one of the things that I can say, because it's in the public domain, is, for example, one of the key products under the IPA-ISA is tuna. One of the biggest producers here is Princess Tuna. So we do work closely with Princess Tuna around the rules, around derogation, about how things can be and can't be done. Right. Very often, so up until now, the IPA-ISA trade agreement only looks at goods, not services, which is an interesting fact, because when you look at the bilateral trade figures between UK and Mauritius, almost 80% of our bilateral trade is services.
And was that deliberate, or was that because the agreement was concluded a long time ago, where things were still very much
goods,
tangible? Yeah.
Exactly. So it's not just the IPA-ISA. Most trade agreements around the world only look at goods. Only recently has services been included. So, for example, the recent one with India side has now included services. Right. The one with China has now included services. So we do have a clause for reviewing IPA-ISA, and we do have one of the proposal from Mauritius to include services that we are now considering and looking at. It's not off the table, because we are conscious that more and more across the world, it's more service-based than more
service-based. The world is becoming more heavily reliant on technology, and I think the line is getting more and more blurred between what's good and what's a service. But one interesting aspect I'd like to know is is it your department negotiating the treaties?
Yes.
It is. Right.
So it would be the Department for Business and Trade. So within the Department for Business and Trade, for all the basket that I've told you, there is a sub-department that sits into it. So we've got a Trade, Export and Import Department. We've got a Trade Policy Department within the Department for Business and Trade. And we all have that. So we all have teams from the Trade Policy team who works closely and directly with the Trade Policy team here at the MFA, for example, on the negotiation and what that would lead. And the last bit that is more and more relevant that we talk about is, when you talk about trade policy, because you've put your finger on one of them, is more and more now you've got things like, technology getting out there. It's the market access, what we call market access barriers. What does that mean? Is very often we get people who say, why is X company, for example, not doing business in Mauritius? It's not that they don't want to come out to the market. It's, is the market conducive enough? Is the business environment attractive enough? So you've said rightly that I've just come back from a trip where we looked at, higher education.
And you went with the minister himself.
We went with the minister himself and a delegation. And one of the major things that we've just done, where people don't realize how big that is the Higher Education Commission in Mauritius has signed an MOU with the Quality Assurance Authority of the UK that now allows UK institutions who want to come and set up and do business in Mauritius will no longer have to do a double accreditation. What that means is, previously when you were accredited in the UK, or anywhere in the world, when you come to Mauritius, you have to go for a double accreditation, going through that. And sometimes that takes almost a year to go through.
Wow. Okay.
So, which is kind of, deterrent. People walk out of deals because it takes so long. So that's one major thing that this new government and the minister have done within 6 months of coming out. What that will now allow is UK institutions who are accredited by the QA in the UK and meet all the requirements. They still have to go through some kind of, short list here, but it wouldn't be a year.
It would be much more simplified.
So that means that more and more universities would prefer to come here. While it was taking a year for Mauritius, if it now takes, let's say, 6 months, while in another part of Africa it takes 2 years, people would prefer to come and do business here. So it's, what is the government, what is the policymaker doing to make the business environment more attractive for not just the UK, for international business to come out. We're very glad and happy that the minister decided to start with the UK, because there is a great number of UK institutions here already. But, he is on the list to go to other jurisdictions to be able to sign the same thing.
Even though Mauritius is a very small jurisdiction, more and more now we're seeing foreign students, Mauritius being a hub for higher education for students coming from Africa, for example. So I think there is the market need, as it were. But do you find, therefore, that from what you're saying, I guess the answer is yes, that you need to collaborate with the Mauritian authorities as well. It's not just private businesses.
It's both. So very often when we talk about private business, that is where we usually say the capital and the investment is. So there's two things. I think in terms of government priorities, it goes hand in hand. It's like government as well can't do everything on their own, which is why we have private-public kind of council. So one of the way of us trying to solve that issue, if you want, so from April 2023, the way we decided to work with both private sector and government was in a structured way. So we set up what we call the UK-Mauritius Strategic Trade Partnership Framework. What that means is it's two-pronged. One is government to government, where we sit annually to decide and talk together with government after consultation with private sector, what are key sectors that would help both the UK and Mauritius, and where Mauritius see the value for having UK partners. And the second prong is it's then led and driven fully by private sector under a joint business council.
Right.
You would have seen recently the recent announcement. There's also mentioned, so what we will soon be doing is a UK Mauritius Business Council under the STP, where we'll come together, involve private sector and government together, talk about what the key priorities are, what are the sectors where both government and private sector see is an increasing need for partners. But we're also conscious there is a lot of over multilateral and foreign friends in Mauritius. I think where the UK is very, I'd say we work very closely with these partners, but also in a very non-overlapping way, if I may put it like that, is we understand where our partners are. We speak with each other. We don't do the same thing in the same space. We are humble enough to understand what are the strengths of the UK, where we are kind of leaders, where we will get in, and where there are space where we think, actually, that's not the space for us to get in. We will support through over mediums, but we will not push head on. For example, we wouldn't get into oil and gas because there's no oil and gas in Mauritius. But let's say
it might be relevant for other countries.
Yeah. But also in spaces where we know, for example, where we talk about health, it's such a vast area. There's enough room for everyone. So we will work collaboratively with other countries to be able to produce kind of the best results of what is relevant for the country rather than just us as business.
Yes. You've been in that role for how long now?
So I joined the British High Commission team in 2016, so 9 years already.
Yeah. And have you seen an evolution in the way we look at British-Mauritius trade and partnership over the span of 9 years?
Massive change. I'd say massive change and improvement in the sense that for me, for example, I've been in this job for 9 years, but I can tell you within that 9 years, it felt like I've done 5 different jobs.
Really?
Because there has been such a massive shift in terms of, not just the sector, but also recognizing, I think from both angles, from a government perspective that they can't do it just on their own. They need international partners to be able to guide them. Not just the funding side of it, but in terms of the technical assistance side of things. So we've seen more and more of that. What we've seen from the private sector has been more leap into education field. And when we talk about education, sometimes people only talk and think about, undergraduate universities. No, I think in Mauritius, one of the niche market and one of the biggest kind of gaps that we have is CPDs. We are a highly educated population and always on the need to do more.
Yes.
So short-term courses, development courses is always out there. And for the professional side of things, there's not much that's done.
Yes.
So this is where we've seen in terms of professional chartered bodies qualification, more and more interest, but also in terms of to how people work with the UK. I think it's not just, I think the country itself has grown. When I say grown, what we used to see from Mauritius where we were a country that was always after grants, aid, but now they want to be
standing on our own 2 feet.
Exactly. They want to be partners at the table to be able to drive it rather than be told how to do it. And I think that's the beauty of it all. When you talk to private sector and when you talk to particular sector leaders, they know where they're going. And we are here just to kind of support them rather than show them the way of doing things.
Would it be fair to say, and if you're unable to answer that question, that's absolutely fine. It's your own opinion, but would it be fair to say that the fact that the UK is no longer in the EU is actually an opportunity to improve trade bilaterally? Or it's neither here nor there? Or no comment?
It's a bit of a tricky one, but because I think the UK, in or out, I think had a special relationship with Mauritius in terms of our export market, export destination, and that in terms of diaspora, in terms of, again, the legal system. I think that didn't change much. But if we look at the world, the outside world, I think, yes, we did start to look a bit more out of the UK a bit more, and we've opened doors. And I think our narrative as well has changed, because we now talk about ourselves as partners of choice.
Yes.
And I think that whole bit of wanting to be partners rather than saying we are leaders changes the whole narrative.
And I think you mentioned something before we started recording about the keyword of prosperity being used. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the way we do, I think the way the UK does trade and investment or does business, it's not about just the money behind it. We are more and more about growth, more and more about prosperity. It's a two-way traffic. When we get into a market, it's not just about doing business, it's how we do the business. For instance, when we're opening an office, how many jobs is being created? What is the benefits to that country? How are we improving the economic situation of that country? And I think that's one of the reasons why I decided to go into that specialization of trade, because when you're growing up, I always thought I want to come back and do something for the country. And very often you think you only have to be a politician. No, there's other ways of doing it, contributing to the economic growth. And if by that you can bring the right deals to the table and you can channel the right projects to the country, I think that's how you do it. And a lot of our projects of what we've done over the past 4 years has been exactly this. How does that improve the economic growth of the country?
As a whole, and also to say that, weirdly, as you say, your employer is the British government, but you look at things from both sides of the aisle to see, okay, it's not about one party taking advantage of the other, it's about how both can prosper from it.
Absolutely. And I think the key word there, and this is why we call the new UK the new Great Britain. So our marketing campaign as a UK government is very often, the tagline is see things differently and do things differently. And this is the exact thing that we're doing. Yes. I think in the build up to opening trade doors, we are very, very, very conscious about taxpayers' money. Value for money. What are we doing and how we're doing it so that it benefits and it's accountable for each and everyone in the UK who are putting their money, because it's taxpayers' money at the end. But also when we're coming out to a market, how is it impacting that country? Are we able to uplift? Is it a community? So things like social benefits is something that we bring to the concept. UK is very famous for, and one of the training that we're doing actually with the Ministry of Finance here is our 5 case model. When you're building a project, there's 5 cases that you need to look at. So that's one of the things that you look, it's not just the money. For example, if you're doing, let's say a housing project in a certain community, are you disrupting anything?
Right.
Are you bringing in the right ecosystem? Is there a healthcare unit next to it? Is there kind of a school next to it? Can you bridge the whole gap together? Is it kind of a green project? So you really look at all the elements of that when you're talking to businesses. And I think that's the new beauty of the new era of doing business.
That's amazing. And it's so lovely to hear that often, in Mauritius, it's certainly been the case for a long time. And we're slowly seeing change in mentality, that public sector is on the one side and private sector is on the other. But I genuinely believe that when a government is able to work closely with the private sector, and also when a government is able to work within the government itself, everyone's talking to each other, you can literally move mountains. And the example of the trip that you did last week, I saw a few photos on LinkedIn. At least it appeared to be an extremely successful trip.
You're absolutely right. I think we've come a long way from that bit of, I'm not saying we've solved the mystery or we've solved that,
sure.
but at least we've made great jump at it, where now there's more. I think it's the leadership that you need to have. So you've mentioned about the trip, and I'll talk about that ministry and that trip that we did, because we saw firsthand how things were being done. I think when the minister decided to go, so it was actually the Education World Forum, which is one of the biggest conferences that's held in London, where education ministers across the world come to that forum to talk about policy and what their countries are doing. I think this year it was oversubscribed. If you look at Africa only, we had more than 20 African ministers turn up.
Wow.
And that's just Africa. And I think it was because you had elections. It's a lot of African continents. So for a lot of them, it was
new government
come out, talk about their vision. And I think the minister had a clear vision about what he wanted. He brought with him in his delegation the regulator. HEC was part of it. This is the first time we've gone to EWF with the regulator on board, because he had a vision. He was like, if a decision needs to be made then and there, the regulator is with us. I'm not bringing people where I'm going to say,
go back and forth,
and then we'll take a decision. I think he had started the conversation. So from January, there was a lot of work before. So from January, we started having webinars and online meetings into channeling and streaming down who we are going to meet, who are receptive to that. So we weren't sure, for example, if we end up in London, call on doing business conference and see who will turn up. We started with a webinar where we had more than 75 people register. And when we actually did the forum in London, it was oversubscribed. And we had people come up. And I think when you have the right direction, the minister had a clear vision of where he wanted to go, what he wanted to do. And I think that helped us. And it makes my life and my work very easy, because, and I think one of the remarks, or one of the many remarks that the minister and the delegation got, and at that moment, though I worked for the UK government, the Mauritian me felt very proud, was that Mauritius was one of the very few, if not the only country, who went to EWF with the clear mind and vision
of what they wanted to achieve,
but also of their ask. They knew exactly what to ask in what forum, and that got the whole room, which was a mix of private sector investors, to pick up those leads and to start talking. We've come back with, I'll tell you, a massive pipeline of work to be done, of universities, schools, businesses who want to come out and do business in Mauritius, which previously, I'll be honest, when we were talking to them, weren't even interested. I can throw out a name out there which a lot of people would be like, are you serious? SOAS is interested in coming out to Mauritius.
You're joking.
No.
That's amazing.
So,
yeah, I think I saw something, and it's one of the best universities in the UK.
And
Charlotte went to SOAS, I believe.
Charlotte as well went to SOAS. She's an alumni of SOAS. But when we went there, so SOAS at the moment has an Africa-facing outward strategy. And when we had the meeting, they were like, that's it. Mauritius is the place we want to have. And this is the first time where SOAS will have an outside of the UK kind of partnership.
That's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
It's a big
deal. A lot of
deal.
people don't realize it, but this is the kind of thing that we want to bring to the table.
And I think it's very important as well for those businesses who are set up. Obviously, you won't start with a kind of probably a full-fledged campus with all courses, but I think make people realize as well that, the UK has always been seen as the preferred destination for higher education, but also very expensive if you go there. And it's also, we're always talking about equity as opposed to equality, opening doors to offering opportunities to people who wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to study in the UK, get the same degree, same quality degree from a reputable university, will open doors for them.
Absolutely. And I think you touch on one of the things when you're saying that. I think at the end of the day, a lot of people, when we're talking education, was like, but trade and investment education?
What does that have to do with trade?
With trade, but it does, because when
it's a business.
It's a business, and we look at it from a business angle. And I think this is where we support Mauritius into seeing the bigger picture. I'm not saying Mauritius doesn't know what it's doing, but we support them in unlocking just that little bit of, look a little bit further what you can do.
What it can bring.
So Mauritius has this aspiration of becoming an international hub for a lot of sectors. And when you're looking at that, exactly this, Mauritian students going into the UK is very expensive. A UK institution setting up in Mauritius, the cost is a third of what you'd pay in the UK. That's the benchmark already. And let's say a campus in the UK can accommodate 1,000, let's say, if we're looking at for a first academic year, but they have 10,000 application, 100,000 application. By having a branch campus here, you're actually tapping into that bit who can't go.
Yes.
But also Mauritius positioning itself as the gateway into Africa. Nigerian students, Kenyan students, Ghanaian students have a lot of difficulty. It's much more difficult for them to get a visa into the UK.
Exactly.
But not to get into Mauritius.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people, at this point, I feel like I work for the Mauritian government, but I think one of the major things that the Mauritian government has done, which a lot of people don't know, Mauritius has set up an Africa scholarship for African students to come and study in Mauritius.
I didn't know that, actually.
So the Mauritian government offers scholarship for African students to come and study in Mauritius. They've also changed the way international students can come, so they can work for up to 20 hours, the working hours, so students can do that. But also the other thing is any African countries who are member of the SADC actually pay the same thing as a Mauritian.
I didn't
here
know
in
that
Mauritius.
Either.
So there's a lot of incentive that Mauritius is putting out there. But when I say, helping them to build that bigger picture, I think Mauritius is very humble, as they don't tell the great things that they do.
Yes, yeah.
So that's where we take them on these trade missions, for them to be able to tell that narrative, to tell that story of what an amazing job they're already doing.
And I think it's also kind of, in a way, educating, because we have this perception that we're, sun, sand and sea. And I think a lot of people, I remember, and I always tell that story because I find it quite funny, when I was in one of my jobs in the UK, I remember meeting one of the MDs who had just flown in from the US. And I said I was from Mauritius. And he said, oh, they have real people there. I was like,
we
what?
exist.
So there's this all, he didn't say that in a condescending way. He just didn't know. So I think a lot of educating people about how advanced we are in a lot of ways.
We're not just a tiny island. There's so much more that I think Mauritius leads and would be a great model for other African countries on how to do things in a very good way. We're peaceful, we are politically stable, and I think it's not just on the education sector. The financial and professional services sector is one of the sectors where, Mauritius is the leader. But I think we've hit a glass ceiling there about, what else we could be doing.
Yes.
And there's so much more that we could be bringing to the market out there. The other sector, I think when I say see the bigger picture is, I think Mauritius should start not only looking at individual sectors, for example, not see financial services in isolation, not look at education in isolation, not look at healthcare, but rather look at them as a means and medium to attract people. So for example, if you want, for example, with that pitch of send, beach and come and work here, if you want a high net worth individual or company to come and set up here, do you have the right healthcare system to the standard of international for them to come out? Do you have the right education standard with the right brands and the right education kind of, not only university, do you have, K-12, kindergarten to 12? Do you have that facility? Do you have the right banking, finance, transaction, e-commerce platform? If only all those dots are connected, that's when you will have the full picture. And I think Mauritius is on that journey, but there are some curtains that needs to be pulled, that you can't work in isolation and look at those sectors in isolation.
Absolutely.
They all work together for you to be able to position Mauritius as that hub in all its full-fledged form.
Exactly. And I think that's where, I mean, perhaps they had more resources than us, but I think that's where countries like the UAE and Singapore have done very well, because they were able to, I remember even as far back as, what was it? I'll betray my age here. About 20 years ago, I did a 6-month internship at the government in Dubai. And even though it was pretty advanced then, it didn't have the ecosystem that it has here. For example, back then we just went there to party and work, but party as well.
Primarily.
But now you go, I mean, in Abu Dhabi, they have the little Louvre. You can see that they're now just saying, okay, I need to be able to attract not just a certain type of expat who just want to, you know, play hard and work hard, but I need to be able to attract families. I'm attracting people from Europe who are used to go and see plays in theatres and culture in general. So we are getting there, slowly but surely. But yeah, what do you find most challenging about your job? If you can be, you know, as candid as possible without getting in trouble.
I think the most challenging, and I'll get into, you know, the typical kind of traditional thing where I think a lot of women in my position would say, being a woman of colour.
Really?
It makes a massive difference. I didn't clock it in when I decided to come back, because, you know, when you've studied and live in the UK and Australia, where, you know, it's what you bring to the table that matters and not what gender, what colour you are, it didn't. But when I got into Mauritius, the harsh reality of what is your family name, what is your caste, what is your ethnicity, where you come from, that was a shocker. And I'm glad that I work for the department I work with, because we are champions of diversity and inclusion. And I am so ever grateful that I work for that department and I got the chance to thrive to where I am. But also, I can't be here and not talk about the amazing champion that we've had for the past 4 years, Charlotte. I think for a lot of us at the office, but also in the network and across the FCDO, as we call it, she has been a role model for a lot of women, but also a lot of colleagues and a lot of peers about, you know, being a woman of colour, of Mauritian kind of heritage, where she's gone and what she's achieved. And she's inspired a lot of us about, you know, you can do it. And a lot of what I've achieved, or a lot of what I've done over the past 4 years, is a lot thankful to her, because she's like, forget about all these people.
Yeah.
Don't let them tell you can't do it. Just go out there and
just go for it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people don't realize having the right boss and having the right leadership changes the whole place of work.
Totally. It changes the trajectory of your career, I think. And I put a post a couple of months ago about, I went to London in February and met up with my old boss from JP Morgan, and she was this wonderful lady. And to this day, that I know that she changed the trajectory of my career. I only did a couple of years there, but she was such a champion of, she wanted you to succeed. She never saw another woman as a threat. She mentored as she should. And I always felt that the confidence that when I moved back to Mauritius, the confidence that I carried when I came here, despite all the challenges that you listed, it was thanks to her. And it's amazing how sometimes one person can change your career.
It is, and I'll say also. So I've been very lucky in having, and as I thought of it, going back in terms of, you know, in my 9 years within the department, all my bosses have been women, great women. My first was the Trade Commissioner for Africa, Emma Waite-Smith. She's been, you go, you do you. She's empowered me, kind of thrown me out there, and I was like, are you sure I can take that? She was like, yeah, you can.
Yeah.
The second one was another wonderful lady called Eleanor Williams, my second line manager. And then my third one, Charlotte. I've had strong women throughout my career who've been out there. But I would also say one of the things that, you know, those women have only pushed me on a journey that I was already on. And to that, I always say that to everyone that I meet. I think my biggest biggest ally has always been my dad. I am an only kid, so he couldn't do anything. He only had a daughter, didn't have a son. So he raised me. He always said, "You're my daughter and my son." So I've never had any barriers about what I wanted to do, or any kind of, as a girl, you should do this, or as a woman, you should do that. No, he was like, you do whatever you want. I remember an episode of, I won't go into the details, but when I decided to go for my second master's in Australia, a relative was like, "She's a girl. Do you want her to study more? She won't get any boy to get married after," kind of thing. And my dad was like, "She does what she wants to do."
That's amazing.
Where I am today, I think my biggest ally has always been my dad, pushing me, and he's always proud, and he's always showing off to all his friends, kind of. This is a picture of my daughter on there. Sometimes, I remember the first time I made the business mag cover, I hadn't seen it. I was in London on a trade mission again.
He probably went and bought like 10 copies.
And I had a friend of his send me a picture and say, "Congratulations." I was like, "Congratulations for what? I've got no idea what's going on. I'm in London." And then he was like, "Your dad sent us this." So it literally did that. He copied and he gave it to people around.
So proud.
Business.
That's amazing.
So,
that's amazing. Yeah. And that cannot be overstated, how important the support of family is, family, friends, whatever your support network is. I have a last question to you. I always like to throw a surprise question, which I never prepare in advance. If you hadn't been on the journey that you are now, what would you have been instead professionally?
I think one of the jobs that I never thought I'd do was teaching job. Because like I said, I saw my parents, both of them are primary school teacher. My dad spent a lot of his time doing voluntary work. So every Saturday, or he would have a bunch of kids where he wasn't taking any money for it. He would teach people. But what that meant, because I was an only kid, meant that I didn't have enough time with my parents.
Right.
So I always said to my dad, "I'll do everything, but I'll never be a teacher." And then there I was doing my first job as a teacher, as an educator. I had the choice of part-time at Royal College of QPIP and part-time as QEC, or full-time at Loreto Convent QPIP. I decided to go with the Loreto QPIP one, just because I thought, somewhere there was something that said, I know I come from QEC and I know what the journey is like. I'm not saying those girls don't deserve it, but they've got the right infrastructure for doing things. And I thought, if I am to put my skills to something, let me go to
where you can add even more
value. And I was very young, went there. I think I changed the thing. Coming from university, there was Moodle kind of platform. So the way I did my classes would not be the traditional of walking in and reading the books. I'd treat them as university, because I was only doing lower 6 and upper 6. I preparing them
critical thinking,
get them to prepare the text before they get. What we do in class was analysis, was discussion, and I think a lot of them benefited from that. So today, when I see a lot of them around and where they've come and what they've achieved in their life, I'm super, super proud. Yeah. I don't have any kid of my own, so when I see them, it's like, a piece of you is growing somewhere, and you had a hand into what they are. And it's so good to see that. So definitely, if I was on this journey,
you'd still be a teacher.
I think
that's amazing to hear, and well done for doing that. I hope I don't end up on the blacklist of anyone, but I know a few weeks ago there were certain comments made about encouraging laureates to come back. And I had a bit of an issue with that because, hats off to them. They did brilliantly and gave them a scholarship, and I'm all for that. I was one myself. But I think that one should not forget that we grew up in a system, we went to the same school, where it was a lot of rote learning. And I started thinking for myself when I went to uni. This is where I learned about real life. And I'm not dissing the education system in Mauritius. It has made vast improvements, and I think that I am where I am today thanks to the fact that I went to QEC. So I'm very grateful for that. But the fact that you went in there and were willing to disrupt the system, I just think all credit to you. So thank you for that.
Well, I had the exact same thought as you, because we both come from the same school. I think a couple of years up and down, but the same generation.
Yes.
And when I went in there, the girls that I worked with, you had from, single parents, a broken family, or, some girls who were battling kind of, issues. And to go in that class and give those girls the comfort that you can do it. I would be honest, some of my classes would be spent with kind of giving them, listening to their issues and trying to find a way of bringing that. For example, when talking GP classes, it wasn't the normal kind of, the economics kind of question.
Yeah.
I would ask them, what do you want to discuss about? Have you ever thought about that? And I think they were girls who, let's say at some point, no one believed in them. They were fantastic students, but it's just that no one took the time to
give them the opportunity,
but also tell them you can do it. And I think this is something that a lot of us miss, not only for students, but also when we're leading teams. Very often, I find that when we're leading teams, when everything is going fine, we are happy with it, but we don't tell people you're doing a great job. But when something goes astray, we are first to tell them you did this wrong.
Yes.
And I think stepping back sometimes and telling your team you're doing an amazing job randomly is even more fantastic, because you see the shock on their face and you make their day.
Yes.
And without you knowing, I'm not saying you do that so that they go above and beyond, but you've just given them the drive of why they're doing it. It's what is the why that drives you.
And give them that confidence that they can do it. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I know you were a bit nervous.
I tried not looking on the other side of the camera and only sticking to looking at you.
I'm sure Natasha's done a great job at it, but I don't think you looked at the camera. Thank you so much, Deeptee. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you so much for giving me this chance, because, talking about the job I do, but also trying to put it out there, because as you say, there's a lot of people or a lot of women who come, who they aspire for a professional career, but sometimes they impose that glass ceiling on themselves because they're like, I will not be able, I wouldn't have. But what I tell those people is, if you don't jump, you won't know if you can fall back on your
100%, and a man's gonna jump before you have, and you lose the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much yourself.